back to order. It's 1:30, maybe a minute or two after. I apologize for that. I think what we heard this morning was well received, and I think it told us a lot about how we can navigate this $1.8 billion spending, the recommendations on it. Our next presenter is a friend of mine now that I can call it, but he was originally brought to our attention by Chairman Hobson. He is a senator from Louisiana, and it's Mac Bodie White. He represents the Baton Rouge area, including Hammond also. And he has with him Sherry Phillips-Heimel, who is the Senate Chief Budget Analyst in Louisiana. We're glad to have you. And Senator, if you will, we'd like for you to start the presentation and tell us how our friends in Louisiana did it.
Does it stay on or press it? It's on. Okay. Thank you, Senator and members. If I could, I'll try to walk through some of the things we did, some of the things that were important to us. Trying to get to my right sheet. So one thing about all these dollars, there's a great deal of paperwork that goes with it. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. As you know, we come into session a little bit earlier than Mississippi. And we came in, I think in February, March. This is this 4-year term, this is my second year I'm finishing. And we've had many, many terms the last couple of years. We've called ourselves in once or twice, the governor's called special session. So we haven't done one session many times. Seems like the last couple of years, we've almost stayed in session. So I know you don't have that many, and that's probably a good thing. But in March of this year, the state received approximately $3.01 billion in federal pandemic appropriations that were contained in the American Recovery Plan enacted by Congress. Since the funds were enacted at the beginning of our session, the legislature was able to develop a plan to allocate the funds. The legislature allocated approximately half, $1.6 billion of the ARP, I'm gonna call it ARP funding stream in Act 410 of the 2021 regular session. The legislature worked together to identify programs that members felt were important to support programs in the industries that had been impacted by the economy, still needing help, and the legislature tried to also identify critical areas for development and employment security. As you know, and I'm sure everybody was very nervous at that time, what did the pandemic do to us? And we were trying to figure out how to best spend these dollars and try to make them last over a 2-year period. The legislature allocated $600 million toward the road program for shovel-ready critical projects for economic development. Next, the legislature deposited almost $500 million into the unemployment trust fund to begin the process of rebuilding that fund to balance and lessen the impact on private business. At the time before the pandemic, we had one of the healthiest unemployment funds in this country. We had almost $1 billion in it, and it was very healthy. But as you know, it dwindled down to where I think we owed $230 million. We owed the feds, we had borrowed, spent that plus another $230 million during the pandemic times. Next, the legislature dedicated $300 million to the water sector program to address critical safe water programs throughout the state. And we created a committee to best come back and tell us how they want to spend that dollars, which the legislators are part of it, but I didn't want to participate because I have to approve it on joint budget. So that'll be happening in the next few weeks, next month anyway. The legislature also allocated $18 million toward revitalization and stabilization of the tourism industry that is so important to the Louisiana economy and restaurant industry. The port industry received an almost 50 million to address their loss in revenues due to the impact of the pandemic. To build upon the 250 million, the Main Street program implemented last year that provided grants to small businesses. The legislature made allocations to small businesses, logging industry, small movie screen businesses, nonprofits, and capital construction technology. Some of those programs, the Main Street, the small businesses, was very important to me, and a couple of members on finance, we helped create that, but we pretty much copied y'all because y'all were already working on it. So we looked at what y'all were doing and we said, that's a good idea. We need to do that for our small businesses. So we do read about you. For the next year, there's approximately 1.411 billion remaining in ARP funds that are available to be utilized in an upcoming session. Additionally, only half of the funding for the capital broadband projects, which totaled 179 million, was allocated. This leaves another 89.8 million for expenditures next year. The CARES Act versus the ARP federal funding. The ARP funds have been used differently compared to the initial CARES Act funds that received last year at the onset of the pandemic. Last calendar year in 2020, the state received almost 2 billion, 1.8 billion in the initial CARES Act funding. Those dollars were used mostly, about 1 billion, to maintain state expenditures at the department level since state revenues projections were significantly reduced. Additionally, this is where the legislature created the original local government allocation distribution program, 511 million, and the small business Main Street program, which received 250. That was a small business program I spoke about earlier. We put that in there that those, I think it was 25,000, they could qualify up to 25,000, and they had to show that they had losses. So I guess that's just a high-end oversight of what we did with the federal dollars. I think my staff's here, they can drill down to any of it that you need. But that's basically what we done, and I'll take any questions if I can answer.
Questions from the committee? I'll ask the first one if you don't mind, Senator. It looks as though y'all spent, was it $5 or $10 million on healthcare? And my question was, we in Mississippi have been asked many times to look at helping critical care workers. What can we do there? And to me, that's a small amount of dollars.
I think that's a misconception in the titling. I think we spent $50 million on critical care workers. Yeah, we spent 50 million. We allocated 50 million for critical care, which would have covered our healthcare workers, nursings, and all those areas.
And that was out of CARES money.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the frontline pharmacy techs, all those areas.
So
That was out of the CARES dollars, right? Yeah, it was last
you
year.
had taken care of that group.
We had
prior
already
to
taken
the
care of
ARPA
50
funds.
million the year before.
Okay. I noticed that you spent a lot on roads and bridges, and of course, we don't think we can. All your money on roads and bridges, did that come from y'all's moving money into lost revenue, and you were able to spend it then on roads and bridges? Is that how you were able to do that?
Yeah, it was 800 million that we calculated was lost revenue on roads and bridges that went to that. And that's where we came with those dollars.
Okay. All right.
And Mr. Chairman, we get an update every month in Joint Legislative Committee on the budget, which I chair the first 2 years this term. And they give us an update, and this month they'll give us a big update on some of these programs and where they're standing and what they've spent and what the Division of Administration spent and exactly where we are. So we get reports every month on it. So we know where we are and what we've spent.
Okay. Senator Michelle has a question.
Sir?
Could you please tell us how you supplemented the healthcare workers' salaries with supplements?
Well, we did it through the CARES Act, so really.
What was your formula?
Yeah, that's right. I have to remember back, it's so much, and we're trying to get ready for the infrastructure bill that, as I understand, is fixing to come to us in the next coming weeks. We'll have to sit down and debate over that one, but it came to us in a grant form, and it was kind of directed which way we should probably do it, so recommendations.
And that was CARES Act funds or ARPA?
CARES or ARPA? CARES. Yeah, that's the one I talk about, was the critical workers. It was under the CARES Act, the first tranche of federal dollars that we expended in 2000.
Okay. Have you completed the spending of your ARPA funds? I'm getting confused.
No, we halved it.
You've halved it.
We have the 3 billion half current year, and we have half left, about 1.4 billion for next year's budget that we'll expend then. We decided to, since it was such a large number of dollars, to supplement our budget and then supplement the losses, that we would half it, where we wanted to see how we was going to do. You know, some of these pandemics and hurricanes and natural disasters we have, you think the world's going to come to the end. Well, actually, there's so much federal dollars coming that it increases the expenditures, which it increases our local taxes and increases our state taxes to where you end up in the black instead of the red. And actually, current year, we're going to end up the year, it's estimated at a $1 billion surplus state dollars. But we did use these dollars to supplement these federal dollars where we could, and held on to our general fund dollars, which we can expend any way we want to. And we tried to hold as much general fund dollars as possible in case we did get in a bind or we were in deficit. We'd have dollars to spend where we'd have more latitude. And Sherry, I mean, I talked to her every day when they were making the federal appropriations Congress. Her and her staff stayed on the internet, watching the hearings, going up some, and they would give me an update every day or two where they were, and you could spend it for this. And we kind of laid out a plan before we got there, much like what you're doing right now. We laid out a plan of what these dollars can be spent for, how we would maybe try to spend them, and we wanted to make sure we spend them in the proper way.
Among our healthcare workers, specifically in the nursing industry, one of the areas that I hear that many of our nurses travel to get higher pay is actually New Orleans. Did you find that y'all had an outflow of nurses, or did you have a lot of subsidies you had to make for nursing salaries in Louisiana, or did you, because they're sure grabbing a lot of Mississippians from what I understand. It's an easy travel to New Orleans and they can make much greater salary. And
I find, Senator, that the healthcare workers, not only in our state and your state, but they're a pretty mobile group now, that they will go to, especially the younger ones in those fields, whether it be nursing, doctors, technicians, whatever, they'll move. They'll relocate and go to where they can make more dollars, and it's become very competitive. And I guess our biggest challenge is to produce enough nurses. And as we were trying to do that, to produce the RNs, we hired a contract company, and that contract company was charging as much as $200 an hour to locate RNs to have them come to work for us in our state, not for us, but in our state.
but did you offer bonuses to the healthcare workers, or did you set up some sort of plan to continue to pay them in future years so they won't leave, come to Mississippi?
I don't think so. No, we didn't have a state bonus.
We can
Now,
steal
we
your
don't
nurses?
control the hospitals, but we did.
You'll-
No, I tell you, Mississippi, we have to be friends with Mississippi. We ain't got a lot of friends left, so we want to be friends with Mississippi. We don't want to take your workers.
But you were able to retain the nurses by offering a one-time supplemental payment?
Yeah, I think, some of the nurses, they looked at it and I'm on a couple of boards, and I stood up the trauma centers in Louisiana. So I go to a lot of meetings with nurses and emergency physicians. And I sit and talk to them. And I had a brother-in-law that was in very grave condition in the Lady of the Lake Hospital for about a month. And I spent a lot of time at the nursing stations talking to those RNs when I'd be up there at night. And, you know, they were a little upset that they were getting paid some of the recruiters to recruit them, where they may have been making anywhere from 70 to 90,000 a year. But they knew the recruiters were making 100,000. But no, the state of Louisiana did not offer them bonuses. We do have partners. We don't have the old charity system no more that was set up under Huey Long, but we have Bobby Jindal moved to the partner hospitals. They partner with private ones, and we supplement some of those hospitals, but not the employees.
Okay, one extra question on the healthcare subject, please, sir. Did y'all's state insurance plan for employees and teachers, did it suffer through the coronavirus significantly in the reserves that you had to pay for healthcare? Was that something that you were able to supplement as well?
I don't think so. We didn't do a lot of that supplementing. I mean, it's kind of a free system since we've moved in the early 2000s from the charity system to the private system. I mean, I'm not saying it's not supplemental. And I know I asked a couple of your members at lunch, Ochsner's, they're a big player in our state. But they're partners. They have the Ochsner's hospitals, but they're partners with other other hospitals in the state, just like the Lady of the Lake, our Catholic system in Baton Rouge and around the state, South Louisiana, heavy Catholic, as I suspect mid to upper Mississippi's heavy Baptist Protestant. It's that system. I'm not saying it's not supplemented, but not by the state. Other than being a partner, and it's kind of laid out, this is what you get as a partner.
Okay, on a different subject, on your funds for your municipalities and the counties, they got the blocks of money as our cities and counties have
By a
done.
direct appropriation from Congress, yeah, a block grant.
Went straight to the cities and to the municipalities. You call them parishes in Louisiana. Did you work out a formula to where you coupled state money with either the county or the municipality for water sewer projects?
Excuse me. No, what we did was we picked out a program for that. I told you, I don't know if I mentioned it. They're to give us a report to joint budget in the next month. We allocated 300 million for water sewer statewide. And we put together a commission. It's made up of legislators and locals. And they're there to figure out how they're going to spend that 300 million. And they will come back to joint legislative committee on the budget, and we'll give our blessing or change it or whatever. But we haven't got to that yet, but we're getting close. We just picked a number that we thought was fair. Okay.
Senator,
Yes, sir.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, and on behalf of this committee and your friends here in Mississippi, thank you and your staff for the time you've given us to share what you've done with us. In reading some of the literature that we had, you referenced the consolidation of existing drinking water systems. As I've done research with our rural water specifically, it seems that consolidation is something that we might ought to encourage. Could you speak to that a little bit? Did y'all create a model that encourages that?
You're looking at a senator that encouraged it very much, because, you know, it's probably you. We have this system sitting here. They have 40 users, 30 users.
Yep.
You have this system with 150, neither one of them very big. And if they consolidated dollars, you capture the efficiency, and it would create more infrastructure and more efficiency of dollars and capture those efficiencies. I'll just say what I was told and I saw. You know, those board members in those water districts, that's where the pushback came from. I doubt it was the management. It was the board members that didn't want to lose their position as a board member on that water district or that sewer district.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We find
When
that.
you have that all over the state, it gets kind of loud.
Yes, sir.
So, but I pushed for it, and I couldn't understand until I sit and looked at it, and I said, well, I understand. It's the local politics.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
one of the things I would like for you to do is kind of let us know about broadband and how, and what did you do in that area? And trying to service those people that was difficult to be served.
Yes, sir. And my vice chair, she sits right to my right shoulder and stays in my right ear a lot. She's from a kind of a rural area and she's a big pusher of broadband, okay?
Okay.
How much did we end up putting in it? That's right. We got almost 180 million federal appropriation. We allocated half last year and half in the year coming. When I speak to last year, I'm speaking of the budget that ends June 30th for Louisiana, okay, of next year. We go July 1 through June 30th. And the whole amount of the 180 is being used for broadband. Some of it's infrastructure, but it's broadband. Education, our first tranche on that, I think maybe that was some federal money on broadband before then, when I think every kid in Louisiana got a personal. Yeah, we sent 2 billion early, but that was mostly, as I understood it, was used for personal devices for the students and the teachers in the system. And so we wanted to come back and make sure out of this $180 million, we spent a good bit on infrastructure and standing up systems and outreach to the rural areas. I mean, many of the students, to explain, in the rural area may have got an instrument, whether it be a laptop or whatever it was, and they didn't have the broadband to use it.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Did you take under consideration the parishes matching grants or anything like that to service those areas that had not been serviced?
On their direct line appropriations?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did, but I've found that a lot of parishes and a lot of cities don't want to let you know what they got. And I've had to bring, especially the universities that got straight line appropriations, because we appropriate a lot of money to higher ed, bring them into committee and set them at the committee and say, okay, now you're under oath by signing that card. You understand that? I want to know what kind of dollars you got. I want to know where you used them. I want to know because I don't want to duplicate it. I want to make sure that we try to cover as much as we can with this money, because this is one-time money, or maybe in this case where we split it, two-time money, but it's non-reoccurring.
Okay.
So I brought them in and asked them, especially higher ed. Not a lot of control over our small city. Now there's 4 cities, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Shreveport, maybe Lafayette, that got straight line appropriations, the local ones.
Thank you very much. Now, another question. Did you all have to characterize what you considered as critical need areas or critical service groups?
Critical,
Service group in the process of allocating your dollars?
you're still talking to broadband.
I'm still, yes.
Okay. I don't know that we identified it, but I suspect it's the same in Mississippi as it is in Louisiana. Those senators and representatives let you know if they don't have broadband. They let you know if they need it when they're on the floor and we're debating, or in committee when we're debating the expenditures. They let you know what they have and they don't have. So that was, I don't know that we laid it out, but it became very apparent. It's not the same all over the state of Louisiana. And with these dollars, we try to do as much as we can to make it fair for everybody. Let everybody have a little piece of the cake.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, Senator Butler. I think we have time for one more question before our 2 o'clock appointment. Anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? Okay, Senator, thank you very much. We appreciate your presence here. Sherry, thank you for being here and assisting. We thank you very much.
And I'd just like to say, Mr. Chairman, that Sherry is probably just about like your staff. Our staff's what make the world go round, okay?
They
We
absolutely
can
do.
politic and decide what we want to do, but they make it happen. And she stays there all day and night and on the internet and on the phone with me. And she watched all these hearings in Congress. So we kind of knew what was coming. And it helped us a great deal. It helped me a great deal to know what was going to happen before it happened. So, but thank y'all. I enjoyed it. Good to see you, Senator. And I'll be seeing y'all
Senator.
later.
As I said earlier this morning, Louisiana is one of the states that divvied up their funds and appropriated their funds legislatively. In Tennessee, it was a little different. The governor's office seemed to control the funds there. And if he's ready to go, we have from the governor's office, Tony Nignigje, who is the policy director for the governor of Tennessee. Carlos, is he ready to go? Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Nignigje. Glad to have you with us. If you would, you're welcome to start your presentation. You're like a television news anchor, a little technical difficulty there. Mr. Nignigje, welcome to Mississippi via Zoom.
Hey, thank you all for having me. My name is Tony Nignigje, Policy Director for Governor Bill Lee.
We are glad to have you with us. And if you would, if you could begin your presentation and understand that when you finish, we'd like a few minutes for a question and answer session.
Absolutely happy to do it. Are you able to see my slideshow?
Yes.
Great, excellent. Well, thanks again for having me here today. I really appreciate the invitation from the Lieutenant Governor to speak to this group about Tennessee's planning in our process and some of the choices that our state has been making with respect to the American Rescue Plan. As I just mentioned, my name is Tony Nignigje. I'm the Policy Director to Governor Lee. As part of my portfolio, I lead all federal affairs as well as the management of new budget and legislative strategic initiatives. So when the CARES Act first passed and we received the coronavirus relief fund, I was put in the position of working closely with our budget office and our legislative partners in aligning priorities and developing those initiatives that we can be proud of here in the state of Tennessee. Looking at Tennessee's impact from the American Rescue Plan, I've included in my presentation just a brief summary of the scale of the dollars that we're working with. And so in addition to $3.725 billion coming to the state of Tennessee in the state fiscal recovery fund, we're also tracking $2.28 billion that's going to be going to all of our local governments. And so I know you likely have a similar version of this chart for you in Mississippi, but my big takeaway from this, and I'm sure a big takeaway for you, is that your local governments are also going to be in the same position of dealing with a one-time windfall and trying to make the best use of those funds in a fiscally responsible and prudent manner. Looking at the details of the fiscal recovery fund, I'll try to stay high level here because I think it's all information you probably already know, but one of the things that we are just tracking are our deadlines, our requirements and restrictions of what these funds can be used. And notably, identifying the similarities with the coronavirus relief fund, which we had a good amount of experience with already, and some of the changes, particularly around physical infrastructure. And so with that, we've established at the governor's office our priorities for the state of Tennessee's fiscal recovery funds are those evidence-based, high return on investments in that physical infrastructure, sewer, water, and broadband, support and ongoing support for our public health partners with the goal of improving those public health outcomes, not just as a direct result of the pandemic, but setting ourselves up long-term to be a healthier state, and then providing the necessary economic relief to keep those industries and affected entities thriving in the state of Tennessee. A fourth priority that we're very concerned with as well is supporting local government risk mitigation and planning around these funds, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. I mentioned at the top of this presentation that we worked very closely with our legislative partners, and in fact, to help advise and support that planning, Governor Lee convened the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group in March of 2020. This was a direct response to the CARES Act and our acknowledgement that in order to make best use of these funds, we have to be agile, but we also have to do it in a way that's deliberative, bipartisan, and includes all branches of government here in the state. So we've worked closely with our leadership in the legislature who have been integral partners in this process, as well as our constitutional officers, our state comptroller, our secretary of state, and our state treasurer. Monthly, since the beginning of the convening of this group, we have met monthly to review ongoing initiatives to track progress against these funds and to look ahead and develop plans for how any remaining funds could be used. These monthly planning process have allowed us and given us space to discuss those parameters and restrictions. We know that the federal statutes and the federal regulations that come with these funds are sometimes a little bit opaque. And so they take a really good back and forth to get down to how they work in practice. Requires a lot of legal analysis as well as practical analysis for what's feasible. Also allowed us to have that opportunity to have a real dialogue on what are those shared goals and identifying those initiatives that really reflect the consensus of the group. As I mentioned before, one of the things that we are very concerned about is how do we maintain that state, but also that local fiscal integrity. We see these one-time funds and acknowledge that for a lot of governments at the local level and perhaps across the country, there's going to be a lot of incentive to use this to plug one-time gaps. That's something that we in the state of Tennessee have been discouraging, both for our agencies, but also for local governments, and really focusing on making a clear separation between those recurring and those non-recurring costs. And to help assist with that, we have launched a state local government technical assistance program. And so if you, I've shared this with the committee, but if you visit the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration's website, you'll find some information around the Tennessee's local government training program. Over the last 12 weeks, we've been holding weekly seminars for local governments in the state of Tennessee to describe, break down the fiscal recovery fund, talk in detail about the limitations of the guidance, what you can do, what you can't do, what is a gray area, how do you make the best case when you're in the gray area, to sometimes just the basics. You know, for a lot of small cities, this is something that is a very entirely new experience for them. Some basic steps like getting a DUNS number, registering at SAMS.gov, and providing that regular accounting and reporting in a format that can be electronically transmitted. That has been a new experience and has required some technical review and practice, and something we are happy to provide at the state. That information, as I mentioned, is on our website, available for public consumption. Always happy to provide any answers on how we're doing that. We are using some of our state fiscal recovery funds to pay for the manpower to help lead this program. We have contracted and procured with an accounting compliance group. that has helped us have the ability to provide reliable and ready analysis as well as strategic support. This here is just the timeline. You'll see this on our website, and I'll move on to the state planning part of the process. For us, when we got the American Rescue Plan, we acknowledged or noticed immediately that we had a much longer time horizon for planning than we did with the coronavirus relief fund. The coronavirus relief fund, if you may recall, that came in April of 2020, and the deadline to expend all funds was December 31st, 2020. So it was a true emergency spending grant and required us to move and think very quickly. With the American Rescue Plan funds, we have been fortunate to see that the guidance from Treasury shows a deadline of 2024 for obligation and 2026 for expenditure of those funds. So we've taken the last 6 months to work closely with our financial stimulus accountability group to develop a plan that reflects the priorities of the administration and our legislative partners, that's organized around those shared values and goals, and can be provide for a consistent reference point for both public reporting as well as public engagement. It also allows us to provide that transparency into the process that has been a critical governor's priority, as well as direction to local governments for how they may be able to maximize their local FRF funds. When we think about our Tennessee Resiliency Plan, we can divide it up into a few major categories. The first is our sewer, water, and broadband infrastructure initiatives. I mentioned at the top of the call, something that is a real opportunity in these funds is the ability to invest in that physical infrastructure. All of these are major priorities for the state of Tennessee in the past, and we have continued that priority going forward. We've also noted that the guidance currently provides for certain public health system investments in health capital facilities. And so we are using a portion of our funds to improve the resiliency of our state and local public health system, and continuing to work with our partners in the hospital industry to address necessary costs to maintain that workforce that is suffering from a great amount of burnout and churn as a result of COVID. We've also provided for economic relief and have continued to reserve some funds for planning around those purposes. Our sewer and water infrastructure program is really born out of the state's prior work in identifying and inventorying our challenges with sewer and water. We are a very long state. We're a state that has not just the river, but also a significant watershed in East Tennessee and the Appalachian Valley. And we have been working to maintain those resources for generations to come. As part of that, we've identified in the state of Tennessee nearly $17 billion in deferred sewer and water maintenance costs. That's a result of years of surveys in the state. And for us, these funds are an opportunity to accelerate the improvement in those deferred maintenance and deferred improvements at our local utility district level. You can find more information on that program at our Department of Environment and Conservation. I've included a link here to show what we're doing. Broadband connectivity and adoption is also a major priority. Our predecessor, the Governor Lee's predecessor, Governor Bill Haslam, launched a innovative and new broadband accessibility grant program that has funded major improvements in broadband over time. But as that technology has improved, really the floor of what is acceptable broadband service has improved, we have not had the opportunity to improve with it. So for us, these funds, and specifically $400 million that are being dedicated for broadband grants, are intended to help accelerate that transformation and provide for more connectivity in our underserved communities. For healthcare, we've also made a major commitment to replace total replacement of our state's public health laboratory. That is the laboratory that processes these samples that are necessary to track COVID-19 mutations and COVID-19 incidents in the state, as well as many other major diseases, newborn testing, as well as other specimens that can help us identify pandemics before they start. So that's something that it's a facility that was built in the 1950s, something that has reached the end of life, and something that we are prepared to make an investment in improving. At the same time, we also have many local departments of health that facilities that are in need of necessary improvements. In the state of Tennessee, our county departments of health are owned by the county, and the staffing and operational costs are funded by the state. So while we're able to help them maintain the workforce, it does fall on the county to maintain those facilities. Unfortunately, in some communities, particularly those that are distressed or at risk, it is an expense that they have not been able to bear. So we are working with them in this new program to help them take a portion of their ARP funds and match them with state ARP funds to fund those improvements. In addition to that, I mentioned support for hospital staffing and other healthcare facilities, working with our skilled nursing facilities, long-term care, and other major acute care hospitals. We are working to provide for staffing incentives to keep nurses and similar positions on the job in the state of Tennessee. We know that is a highly competitive national market, and one where we are subject to significant job supply challenges. So we are working to help maintain and offset that, and working particularly with our hospital association and other long-term care association leaders in implementing that program. As for economic relief, I've mentioned tourism industry support. We are working with our State Department of Tourism Development, as well as our local destination marketing organizations to continue to market the safe reopening of Tennessee. That is something that we as a very tourism heavy state are very focused on maintaining for long-term economic resiliency. We've also received significant outreach from our arts and culture institutions, such as museums, and those that really benefit from an in-person customer base and have not quite had that robust recovery as other sectors of the industry. And then, of course, agriculture being our #1 industry in the state of Tennessee, we're very concerned about producers and others in the food supply chain who are facing increased costs, meat processing facilities, local farmers markets, those parts of the supply chain that help bring food to our citizens' tables are areas where we want to make sure we are not losing ground as a result of the pandemic. So all together, this represents approximately $3.2 billion in total in the state's fiscal recovery fund. We do have close to $500 million that we have not yet planned for, and even this afternoon are having additional meetings with our financial stimulus accountability group to continue to develop those new initiatives that will help fulfill that grant award. We have also reserved $300 million for planning for additional state health capital expenses. We have other state health facilities that we know are going to be in need of improvement, and we are working closely with our partners and our state building commission to identify what those are. We're also looking at understanding that we have not reached the ends of the economic relief and those challenges or those requests for economic relief. And so we've actually begun an external engagement process where those entities can apply to the state, demonstrate what those losses are, and we will consider them and then develop a process for which relief could be distributed. We're hoping that through this process, we can identify major trends as well as major partners who can help us distribute relief to where it needs to go most, understanding that there is going to be a wide scale of challenges and economic disruption in the state. We're going to continue that engagement, that feedback with our constituents. We rely heavily on public feedback and public input into the process, as well as working closely with our local government partners to help them make the best use of their funds. That concept of leverage is something that we are very intentional about, and understand that a state ARP dollar can go a lot farther when matched with local ARP dollars. So that's a major part of our strategy going forward, and something that's going to be part of our priority in how we work. With that, that's my presentation. I tried to move quickly. So if there are any areas where you'd like me to revisit or any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Michelle.
Thank you. On your plan for setting aside 300 million for necessary public health capital investments for the future, is it your intention that that money could be used for constructing a medical facility from the ground up, including design and construction, or is that just for water and sewer for throughout your whole state for health facilities?
So we are considering the whole facility. Under the guidance, we understand that capital facility improvements can be, if they are responsive to COVID-19, they can be eligible. And so for us, we're focused primarily on those that are going to have a very, they're going to have a customer service nexus with either COVID, the pandemic, or particularly vulnerable populations. So a good example would be our Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. That is a population that for whom remote options, telemedicine, are not feasible. And so when you are in a time of a significant pandemic or outbreak, having a facility that's safe, having a facility that can provide them with those, with that service to improve their outcomes is something that we believe is eligible, and feel prepared we can defend that if asked.
And do you believe the project would have to be completed in the specified period of time? Doesn't that make that quite a tight window?
It does, and that is actually part of the challenge that we're working on. And so we feel comfortable that with consultation with our Department of General Services and our research of the market and what the market can do, we know those project timelines are longer than they have historically been, but we feel comfortable that projects launch early next year, or the projects that we are considering, if launched early next year, could be completed by the 2026 timeline. We understand the 2024 timeline being that timeline for obligation, and then 26 for expenditure.
And if you did get started on a project, we're not able to complete it during the specified period of time, would it be your opinion that you would have to use funds other than ARPA funds to complete the project?
I think for new expenditures, that's right. Yeah, expenditures that are expenditures that take place past the award period would need to come from state funds.
Thank you.
Senator Parks.
You spoke specifically about the staffing assistance program for hospitals. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit? Just a little bit deeper, where I think two things I'm looking for particularly, was that something that was one-time funded, or is that something that carried stipulations with it as well?
Yeah, so it is one-time funding. We've had criteria that's been based on participation, and facility participation has been based particularly around COVID incidents. So our Department of Health has established 3 different criteria. One is a 4-bed utilization criteria, one is an ICU bed utilization criteria, and the third is a COVID admission criteria, just a raw number. And so based on those criteria, a facility can apply for, a hospital can apply for a set amount of funds that must be used for a one-time bonus or hazard pay for those affected nurses or other employees who are frontline employees. So that's the staffing assistance portion of it. Does that answer your question?
It does, but when you gave that one-time bonus, was there a stipulation that said you had to work the next 3 months, the next 6 months, or a year, or anything along with that, or was it just a bonus?
I'm not aware of any long-term stipulations or monitoring that we are doing right now to ensure that those staff remain. We do have good reporting from the field that this has helped, and that facilities who are participating have seen a lower rate of loss. Now, as we move into a really new era of mandates, we feel like that's a major test for us, but we feel comfortable that it's making progress.
And how much did you all contribute to that?
So for the American Rescue Plan, we anticipate for this period of the latter half of 2021, the total cost of administering the program for all hospitals who would be eligible is about 120 million. And that's for a 6-month period. So it is a relatively expensive program. And it's not one that I might recommend expanding for beyond the healthcare industry, for instance. I think you would really want to focus something like this on where you have really urgent and immediate impacts on the COVID, on your ability to respond to COVID.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, I have a question or two. First, did I read that y'all set aside funds to rehab, repair and maintenance for some of your local health departments themselves? And if you did, were those health departments buildings, were they owned by the counties they were in, or are they state owned?
We did, and we have set aside, I apologize, the number just escaped me, but we have set aside $129 million for that purpose. That is intended to be a matching program for local counties who are the owners of those facilities on county land to contribute some of their American Rescue Plan funds to those projects. And so to answer your question, yes, $129 million, and those are county-owned facilities, but facilities that are an essential part of our state Department of Health's pandemic.
And the funds were able to be used for repair and maintenance of the building, is that correct?
That's correct. If it is an expenditure or a project that helps improve their ability to maintain that pandemic rate.
And if you would talk just a moment about your critical care workers, your nurses, how much did y'all allocate for that program?
$129 million, sorry, $110 million. However, one of the criteria adjustments that we're evaluating right now as a group would actually increase that cost to 120.
Do any committee members have any questions? Okay. Tony, thank you very much for being with us and telling us how Tennessee did it. Please tell Governor Lee that we thank him for allowing you to take 30 minutes out and be part of Mississippi for a moment.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Appreciate the outreach and appreciate the Lieutenant Governor's office for their kind invitation. So thank you for having me, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda to kind of finalize everything is to tell us, how's it going to work when it's all over? And who's going to be looking at what? And what are we going to be looking at? So I've asked our auditor, Shad White, to present to us today with his staff and to give us a little bit about maybe what we need to look for when developing these recommendations to ensure that we leave them in a situation that is tenable. So, Mr. Auditor, you are welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you all having us in early. I know that there are a lot of competing priorities right now, and we're honestly very grateful for the chance to come and talk to you a little bit about how we've been answering questions about how you can and cannot spend this money on the front end before you all get too far along down the road. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for dedicating your time to it too. I know there's a lot of time away from your families outside of session, so I certainly appreciate it. With me today, I have Jeff Goodwin here, who has decades of experience both in local government and at the state agency level. So he's county administrator in Rankin County, and then has worked a couple different times at the state auditor's office. And then I have he's a CPA as well. I have Mark Johnson with me, who is an attorney in the auditor's office. He's done a couple different stints in the auditor's office and is our senior most, I don't say oldest, senior most attorney in the auditor's office. So just a couple of things from me, I guess, to kick this off, and then we're really happy to answer any questions that you may have. I mean, my I guess overall message is we are happy to help answer questions today, but really going forward, I want you to understand that we're able to answer questions that you have as you go through this process. So if you wake up at 3 a.m., Senator DeBar, and you want to know the answer to something, ping me and we will get an answer to you. In fact, it's probably a little bit more helpful to get those answers as you go on an ongoing basis and get them in writing so that we can go assign a team of attorneys or CPAs back home in our office to look at it and then figure out the answer. So we're going to start the conversation today, obviously, but whatever you have after today, let us know and we'll work on it. Two is we have been fielding questions about ARPA for the last few months, really, mainly from local governments, and we're out doing training simultaneous to answering all these questions. So the Director of Technical Assistance today is actually not here because he's doing a training up in North Mississippi in Oxford. So we've been involved in the weeds of some of this stuff for some time now. If we can answer a question for you because we have already researched the answer and we know it, we will. But if y'all have questions today that we don't know the answer to, we're not going to shoot from the hip. We're going to take it. We're going to go back over there. We will research it and we'll get you an answer. So we may not know the answer to everything today, but we're going to work on it. Kind of final thing, I guess, is this summer I went and spoke at MML and at the Supervisors Association. And of course, they wanted to know about ARPA funds too. And that was the main topic of what I talked about. So I'll just tell you very briefly what I told them. You know, a couple of important things to remember about ARPA, especially versus CARES Act, is that you have a longer time fuse, obviously, with ARPA than you did with the CARES Act. So for us in the auditor's office, that means more opportunity to think carefully about how we're going to spend it and make sure it aligns with the statutory requirements inside ARPA. That, I think, has given local governments a ton of comfort. We want them to spend it quickly and effectively, but also you want to make sure you get it right too. So they got a longer time fuse to obligate the money, a longer time fuse to spend the money. The other thing that we are really impressing upon them is the need for documenting all this stuff. So in the case of ARPA, you really need to, when I say you, I'm really talking about local governments, mainly that are spending these funds, really need to, as you're dispersing these funds, document how the programs or how the disbursements fit with one of the 4 big goals of ARPA, because that's the thing that federal auditors are going to come in and want to see at the end of the day. They're going to want to come back and they're going to want to see, in case you get audited, they're going to want to see the documentation that lines out how this program or how this idea fit with one of the statutory requirements for ARPA. And did you ensure that the money was going for a legally allowable purpose on the front end as you're dispersing those funds? I said that in one way to encourage them to start documenting now and look at those ARPA requirements, but two, to remind them that at the end of the day, we're not really the big bad guys that you want to avoid trouble with. The big bad guys are the Office of the Inspector General, right? Because this is all federal money. So we are here to try to make sure that people understand the rules and are complying with the rules on the front end, because we know that it's going to be a black eye if we do something wrong, or if a local government in Mississippi does something wrong and the OIG comes in a few years later and we have to claw back some of that money, or they have to claw back some of that money. So that's really been our mission in the auditor's office for the last few months, is reading, understanding these rules and making sure that other folks understand them as well. So that's all I've got for you. Would love to open it up to any questions that you have. If they're hard questions, I'm going to defer to the 2 men who have been doing this literally as long as I've been alive. They love me pointing out stuff like that. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. White, thank you for
Sure.
being here, gentlemen, being here today.
Sure.
Some of the states, counties and municipalities have already started dispersing their money. Are you seeing things being done that are big uh-ohs?
Say that last part again.
Seeing some things being done that shouldn't be done, that you
Should
think?
not be done.
Yes, sir.
We've tried to answer these questions on an ongoing basis. If we see criminal activity, we're obviously going to grab that immediately and start working on those cases. But I don't know personally yet of any ARPA-related misspending that has happened that has resulted in a big case yet. We have issued some demands on a few other things, but some of that money is CARES money. So honestly, nothing big yet, I think, is
Yes,
the answer.
Maybe not speaking to criminal activity as much as misinterpretation or a looser interpretation of what the guidelines are. We've got some areas that have bonused their
Yeah.
entire staffs as essential workers. Any You have any bearing on any of that type of stuff that's going on?
I'll tell you one, and then I'll turn it over to these guys if they want to give some more examples. But, you know, even at the Supervisors Association, I went and spoke, and then as I'm walking down, two supervisors walk up to me and they say, hey, what about this idea? And I think it was something to do with the soccer field, you know, and that's when you say, look, you really need to, before you set your heart on a goal, you really need to come and talk to us to let us look at that. So we do get questions like that where people have sort of put their mind toward a project that's probably not going to be allowed, but typically what we're seeing is they come to us first before they get too far down the road. Y'all have other examples of things that you've seen or put a stop to, or he was thinking of the soccer field too. Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, you want to come?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that it's been brought up in this meeting before that there is a county that may have paid a bonus. It's been our interpretation that bonuses or one-time pay like that is problematic. And I'm not sure what the status of that is right now, but we can certainly find that out for you.
To follow up a little bit on Senator Williams' question, in your training sessions, have you seen maybe one common thread going through all the meetings of, well, I thought I could spend it on this particular project? And y'all say, well, no, you can't. Is there one common thing that seems to be a problem?
I'll tell you one problem with the narrative as it plays out. So Mayor A reads ARPA and has a good team advising him, and he calls the state auditor's office, or she calls the state auditor's office, and they realize I can spend money on water, and I got a ton of water projects that I need to address. So I'm going to spend money on water. And then Mayor B calls Mayor A and says, how are you spending all your ARPA money? And Mayor A says, I'm spending it on infrastructure, because in Mayor A's mind, water is infrastructure. So now Mayor B has heard infrastructure. So Mayor B, without relying on advice from an attorney, without calling the state auditor's office, may think, I'm going to fix that bridge outside of town. So that's the confusion around infrastructure, I would say, has been a theme that I've noticed a couple of different times. And I've had to remind some mayors, look, you know what you mean when you say infrastructure, because when you say it, what you really mean is you're going to do that water project, which is fine. But don't say the I word out among the other mayors, because some of them don't know what you mean. So that is one thread. And that really comes back to the basic advice of do your own homework, right? If you have an idea, do your own homework, have your city attorney, your county attorney look at it, call us yourself. Don't have somebody else call for you. Don't have the mayor next door call for you. Don't have the board of supervisors in the next county over call for you. Call us, and then let's talk it through. Well, look, I mean what I said. As questions come up and y'all have my cell phone number, have our number in the office, ping me, shoot me the question verbally, by text, whatever it may be, and we're happy to answer. Senator Parks, did you have?
I do. Thank
Yes,
you
ma'am.
so much. Thank you for your time today as well. Thank you, Chairman. Could some of the ARPA money that they received be used as match money for the monies that could potentially come or be dispersed from the 1.8?
Yeah. Do you guys want to speak to the match or? So the question, let's see if I restate it accurately. Could you use some of your funds in the legislature to match, which I know is a proposal that's been discussed, to match local projects? Do y'all want to speak to that, or questions that you've gotten about that?
I don't know that we've directly had that question, but as long as you're not trying to match federal dollars, I think you could do that. In other words, ARPA funds can't be used to match the federal portion of another grant.
Okay, all right.
Yes, ma'am.
That clears it up. Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator DeBar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess invariably a mayor or some official, or county, they will not seek the advice of the auditor's office or whatever. Is there anything that we can put in statute when we end up appropriating this money that would key in or cue these officials when they are drawing down this money that, yes, this is what needs to be done so we can avoid the clawback eventually, because that's what we don't want ultimately.
You know, the first thing, it's a good question. I haven't really thought about that much of what you could put specifically in statute as verbal cues to them as they're reading it. I mean, you know, I guess you could reiterate the four big major goals of ARPA and list out the water, sewer, broadband kind of expenditures that key them in on that. I'd have to think more carefully about compliance that you would want to put in there beyond that. That's always sort of the trade-off is putting good words in there to remind them of the statutory requirements that are also in federal law. It doesn't hurt. But if you put in additional internal controls, you may be guaranteeing that less money is misspent, but you're also slowing down their process to some extent too. So we also get into this world too, where we had this call last week. A county in South Mississippi, I think it might have been in your district, county in South Mississippi wanted to set up a grant program. And so they called us and they said, can we write the grant application and then give it to y'all to approve? The answer to that, unfortunately, is no, because we have to be able to come back in and audit the grant program after the fact. So we can't help you create the grant program and write the grant application and then check to see if we did it correctly on the back end. So there are some things that even if you put in a statute and said, and the state auditor's office shall help you write the grant or something like that, we couldn't do that under accounting standards and still audit the money. So there's some limit to what we could put in statute that would involve the state auditor's office. And we kind of walked through that with CARES too. We had a long conversation about what role could we play in CARES and helping to disperse that money? And basically the answer is almost none, because we have to audit on the back end. Yes, sir.
I will ask this. I'm not sure I want to. I'm sure you're going to be able to handle all the audits that will come from this with the appropriation that you already have. Isn't that correct?
So it's a loaded question right there. Let me say this. I do not think, and I want to be a good steward of the taxpayers' money too. We are not going to ask for some big increase in our budget this year. I will say that there's a lot of audit work to go around because of the stimulus spending. That is true in every single state in the country, obviously. So the biggest problem that state auditors' offices are having, and frankly, private CPA firms are having too, who also have to be doing these audits, is that there are not enough auditors. There are not enough people with the skills to do this work that we can get working on this to compensate for the amount of audit work that there is. So more money, frankly, is just not going to solve that. I told that to the governor a couple of weeks ago. Yes, I'd love to have 20 more people to audit this money to make sure that we're doing it right. But the hangup is that those 20 people don't exist out there. Or if they exist out there, they're being gobbled up by private CPA firms who can pay more than I can. And even if you talk to those private CPA firms, they'll tell you, we would like 20 more people on top of the ones that we got too. So short answer is there is more work than there are people who are skilled enough to do this. And money is not going to help us fix that problem. In part because this is a thing that's happening in every state. This is not like Katrina in the sense that Katrina only hit 2 or 3 states. And so all of the resources went to our 2 or 3 states, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. And so the contractors could come down here and do that work. This is nationwide, right? So everybody's competing over these CPAs all across the country, and it makes it very difficult to get the staff that you need to audit this. But I can tell you, we're going to do the best we can. We're stretched thin, but we're going to do the best we can over the course of the next few years. This is not something that's going to go away for us next year, obviously. Y'all are going to be appropriating this money. Local government's going to be spending this money for several years. So we're going to be doing this probably as long as I'm state auditor, auditing this money specifically.
All right. Thank you very much. We
Yes, sir.
appreciate your attention.
Thank y'all for having us. We appreciate it.
That concludes the official program for today. I will tell the committee that please be prepared for 2 days beginning the week after Thanksgiving. I don't know how long it'll take, but I think we need to reserve that time just in case we do need that much time. Christy will be getting in touch with you if she hasn't already about days that will be used. My intention is to work on an afternoon of one day and the morning of the next, and adjournment and beginning gavel in will be determined by the amount of business we feel like we need that day. Are there any questions of the committee members before we adjourn? If not, we'll stand adjourned and I will notify you of the time of the next meeting. Thank you.